Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about the Sega Saturn. Sega's weird, gothic, hipster kid who only talks about animes you've never heard of, and is cool, like he's a cool guy, but he's strange and you only really see him at Christmas. But whatever, he's a good console. I like the Sega Saturn. It's just an odd one. Now that said, people have always kind of liked the Sega Saturn, but the biggest problem with it has always been the games are really expensive. I mean, like, historically, that's pretty much always been the case. And as time goes on, it's getting worse and worse and worse out there. I do not envy anyone who's trying to collect Sega Saturn stuff. So a lot of solutions have come over time. You know, you have the early ones in the 90s with, like, you know, mod chips and so on and so forth. Nowadays, we have things like ODEs, where you basically take the laser assembly out of the console and replace it with something like the RIA or the mode. I've done videos on each one of those. There's also other ones like the Fenrir, which I have not covered. And then there's the Satiator. However, that one does not actually use the disk drive. It uses the VCD slot. So that one's kind of its own animal. Those type of options. But the other problem with Saturn stuff is historically it's always been very difficult to emulate. Not impossible, certainly, and a lot of games run better than others, but that has always presented a problem. That, on top of that, is the fact that there's a lot of exclusive content on the Sega Saturn that is lost to time because the source code and various other things about those particular games prevents them from ever being re-released. So, in other words, the Saturn is kind of a nightmare to get into, especially if you're just the average guy who wants to play the Sega Saturn and you don't want to sell a kidney in order to do it. So there was a solution in the 2010s era that is not new, and that's what we're talking about today. But I feel like it's kind of been forgotten to a certain extent because everybody's starting to move on to ODEs, and I'm seeing more and more in communities like my own Discord where people want to get into the Saturn, but that they only think of the ODEs as options. And I'm here to talk to you about a much more affordable option. If you're the guy out there who's like, dude, I just want a cheap solution that allows me to relatively easily play Sega Saturn games, and I don't want to modify my console, I don't want to take the disk drive out, I just want to take my console out and play games for very little money, you might like this option. What we have right here is a little cart called the Pseudo Saturn. Now, this unassuming little cartridge, which shout out to my buddy Jesse, who he and I did a trade and he hooked me up with this. This is a Action Replay cartridge, but modified. Now, Action Replay was released in the 90s for the Sega Saturn, and it took advantage of the memory card slot Sega put into it. Now, Sega really only intended it for like additional memory, but they allowed it to do other things. But as far as I'm aware, they never made their own version. In the case of Action Replay, they said, yeah, we're going to go one better. So they created a memory card, but in addition to being a memory card, it had extra RAM in it for the games that needed that. It also had cheat code functionality, kind of like a Game Shark, which incidentally also existed for this, but do not use those. The pins on those are very thick. If you ever put one of those in there, it spreads the pins, and thus normal cartridges no longer function, so don't ever use that. The same with the Interact memory card. They were designed the same way, don't use those. And then the other thing they allowed you to do, which was a big selling point of the Action Replay, was it also allowed the console to bypass the region coding. So if you had a North American console and you're like, hey, those Japanese games, they're a lot cheaper, I'd really rather be playing those. Oh, I can't, disk protection. Action Replay would be like, lol, I don't care. And you would just put in the Action Replay, then put in your Japanese game, boom, no problem, it would run. Now, again, as time has gone on, improvements have been made. And that's, again, where the Pseudo Saturn comes in. Now, when I first got the Pseudo Saturn from Jesse, I fired it up, and it was comically out of date, as you can see in this footage. Like, this is a very old build of it. And shout out to my buddy Mr. Mario, because he made a video explaining how to update it. Which is a relatively simple process of downloading a certain firmware update ISO, burning that, and then running it as if it was a Saturn game. When you already have an operational Pseudo Saturn, that's really not that big of a deal. It just treats it like it would any other disc. All you have to really know at that point is like which build to pick. But yeah, it was a relatively painless process, and now it's all like super updated. Now, what can it do? What is so special about it? Well, I have it all set up here, nice little LEPO monitor, and I have it in the Hitachi High Saturn because why not be super fancy? Now the reason I picked this particular Saturn, other than just being, for the pretties, is I wanted to prove a point that this is a Japanese console that is completely unmodified. And I will prove that by taking the cartridge out. We have Radiant Silvergun sitting in there right now, so we're going to fire that up, and you're going to see it boot up no problem. Oh, plus enjoy that little Hitachi boot up screen. Probably don't see that one very much. But anyway, so once we get past all that, it'll get into the game. Now, I apologize for the load times. It is a Sega Saturn. There's only so much I can do about that. But I just want to show a little bit of gameplay here. This game's made by Treasure, by the way. If you've never played this game, this was the game... Ikaruga is a sequel to this game. This is a very good game. It's been re-released a few times, but it's cool to play it on the OG hardware. But yeah, if you just start the game as per normal, I swear I'm going somewhere with this. But yeah, you can see we got the intro screen, blah, blah, blah. And so now I'm shooting at stuff. Now I'm going to intentionally get hit, or I'm going to try to. Somebody hit me. There you go. Okay, so I died. That was the whole point. Now, turning that off, if we restart this up with the Pseudo Saturn in it, we'll boot this up again. I apologize, I'm going to skip past the Hitachi screen just because you don't need to see it again. Or maybe you do, I don't know, but there's probably whole clips of it. But anyway, so now by default, the Saturn boots into the Pseudo Saturn. Now, for the record, the Pseudo Saturn is preset to automatically jump into a disc 5 seconds after you turn it on. I intentionally disabled that in the settings menu, and I like the option to click around and look at stuff, so I turned that off, but that's by default it's there. So anyway, so it's got all sorts of stuff, all sorts of features. Now in this case we're going to use the codes feature. You press X on the controller and it will detect what disk you actually have in there. And if that disk exists in the game's database, as far as its cheat code database, it will automatically come up. So we're going to just select the first code, which is invincibility, and we're going to press start. And from there it should boot right back into the game you just saw. And, again, load times are going to be a thing, but whatever. Treasure again, and then we start, go ahead. And I'm just doing this to prove a point that the action replay codes do, in fact, work. You'll see for yourself. In this case, it's kind of interesting, actually, because what it does is, I guess in this game, when you take damage, you turn invisible like Sonic does when you flash for a second. So the Pseudo Saturn is giving the game a constant command to stay in that state, hence the character can never die. Now I'm not saying that makes this game better or worse or anything like that. I mean, it actually kind of fundamentally ruins the game because you can't really do anything. You can't die, so there's no challenge. But my point is, it works. Now let's swap it out for something else. I've got a few different games on the table here, and we're going to try a couple of them. You saw that one. We could also run Virtuon. This is the Korean edition Samsung Saturn. Yes, Samsung, the company, actually released a version of the Saturn, and this is the only game I have for it. However, it's just a normal Sega Saturn game, and it's in Japanese coding, so there's nothing really special about it. This is me just kind of showing it off. What we're going to do instead is play a European game, because remember, this is a Japanese console, so it's not supposed to natively play European games. This is a game called Darius Ii. This game was never released in North America. And now taking out the Pseudo Saturn to prove a point, and not that you guys can't predict where I'm going with this, but I just want to make sure there's no conspiracy about it being modded and there's, for some reason, whatever. I don't know why people would think that, but whatever. I just want to make that clear. See, it will not play this game because it's like, hey, region coding, I ain't touching it, even though it's a legitimate disc. So turn the Saturn off again, put the cart back in, and now try again. And we'll go past our little boot screen and then wait a moment for it to load up. Again, by default, it loads into the Pseudo Saturn, which is surprisingly quick. And I know in this particular game's case, there is no cheat code, so we skip all that. Again, the game has to be in their database. So then it, runs it as per normal. This is a great way to bypass, obviously, region coding on original discs, just like the original Action Replay was good at, although I'm not going to lie, the menu on this is cleaner than the original one, which you can kind of get a quick look at over here on this footage. It was just kind of an uglier menu, and it was much more 90s. Whereas this one is much cleaner, I feel. And I also, maybe it's just, I don't know, it just feels more responsive, too. But yeah, as you can see, now Darius Ii totally works. So no problem on the imports, right? Let's turn that off. And so we could test an American game, because again, an American game would be an import. But I only have this one, Panzer Dragoon Saga is basically a garbage sports game at this point. Who even cares? Nobody needs to see that. So let's test something people actually do care about. I'm obviously kidding. That is a legit copy, by the way, but I have that there for a point, but we'll get to it. But anyway, it plays American games. There's really no point in showing that. What I am going to show you instead is a different disc. This is a fan-made reproduction of Linkle Liver Story, which was a game released in Japan. However, it was never released here. Fans translated it, put it into English, and then this particular copy that has nice artwork and everything, this was actually released as a convention exclusive at Cowlitz, which is a convention that John Hancock, other YouTuber, used to run. Only 10 copies of this were ever made. I happened to be there. I decided I would pick one up. But the thing about it is, as nice as this is, it is just a reproduction, which means it's running on a CDR. It's not actually running on a pressed disc. Hence, that screen right there. It wants to play it, it hung on it, but it can't actually read it. However, we can fix that. Go ahead and put in the Pseudo Saturn and try again. Once again, we'll skip our little menu here, and it'll fire right up. Now, again, this game also is not in their database, by the way, so there's no codes for it, but you get that, and then we start it, and it recognizes what the game is, and we're on our way. So this is a great way to play backup games, reproduction games, and frankly, expensive games. Now, here's the thing. I don't usually advocate piracy, to be totally honest with you, but there are some consoles where, frankly, it's like totally unavoidable. Like, there's some consoles like Neo Geo AES, I'm sorry, but no real person out there has the money to acquire those type of things. There's a lot of Saturn games where that's just not feasible. Now, I'm in the lucky minority where I actually got a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga. I got this years ago. I did a video on it at the time. I got this, Panzer Dragoon 1, Panzer Dragoon 2, all complete, nice, full sets. Buy it now, eBay, $80 for the 3-pack. That was 2014. That is not a normal occurrence. That's somebody screwing up bad. But I got it. That makes me in the minority. So I'm not sitting here in the high ground being like, you cannot play your imports and your pirated games. Do it. You're never going to get this game again. It's not coming back. And it's a very good game. So it deserves to be played, and this is the only like cheap method to do it. Now you might be sitting there going, how do I get a Pseudo Saturn? I don't know how to mod stuff. I don't want to do that. You're actually kind of in luck. If you can't do this, which again, Mr. Mario did a great video on how to modify one, you don't even have to like do that. There's actually guys who sell like full, complete built ones already on AliExpress. Now, I don't really use AliExpress in general. I don't really like those type of websites, but they're pre-made ones for $35. I think there's a $50 version that includes the extra RAM as well, and that's like the complete package. Now, I've not used it, but I've seen reviews of it and people seem pretty happy with it, so it's an option. If you don't care about the RAM, you can get it down to the $35 point, and then it just becomes a boot cart that lets you play the majority of the games that are out there. So, I mean, I just wanted to throw this out there as not even an option, because I know a lot of people already know about this, but it's basically just a reminder like, hey, if you're into the Sega Saturn, but you don't want to sell a ton of stuff, you don't want to modify anything, and you, like, look at in the case of the High Saturn, right? This is such a special edition of the Sega Saturn. No part of me wants to rip its laser out and put in an ODE in it. No part of me wants to modify this console in any way. But because of that uniqueness, it actually makes the console comically limited, because then it can only use its original release Japanese games. Unless you have this little beauty, which incidentally, once you take it out, the thing is stock again. This doesn't in any way update the actual console. So, yeah, I think that that's a pretty great solution if you're that guy. And I wasn't going to do this before, but if you'll, kind of, sit with me for a second, I think I'm going to crack open Panzer Dragoon Saga and show it to you guys real quick here. Ooh, look at that. I mean, dude, this game, I have actually seen copies of this game get purchased. I saw a copy of it at a convention here in Chicago get sold for $1,350. That's insane. I can't fathom the kind of having those type of resources where you would be willing to pay for that. And I'm not. So, but I just want everybody to know, like, it works. You can do this. You can acquire your own games your own ways. and then you can enjoy the Saturn in a relatively cheap way. Now, the only real catch to all of this is you do have to find a Saturn that obviously has a reliable disc laser or laser assembly. Let's see here. There's no codes available for that game. That's kind of surprising. But okay, that's totally fine. It doesn't have codes for Panzer Dragoon Saga. Wow. I'm a little surprised. You would think that would have been in the database because it's like one of the most iconic games on the platform. But, yeah. There you go. Panzer Dragoon Saga, legit copy. You guys had the privilege today of seeing possibly one of the rarest games of all time, officially a legit copy, running on one of the rarest versions of the Sega Saturn of all time. The only thing better if we had run it on the Sega Pluto, which, incidentally, the Sega Pluto, not that it really matters, cannot run the Pseudo Saturn. We think it's due to like a RAM conflict or something. We're not totally sure. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I just wanted to put that out there so that everybody can enjoy that. Again, I'll try to put a link in the description to the AliExpress one so you guys can look at that. I think there's also guys who sell them on eBay as well. I have nothing to do with that or anything. I just wanted this to be informative. So there you go, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon. All that stuff's in the description. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you all there.